People like Lord Shaftesbury have come to be known as philanthropists, a word which literally means lovers of mankind. The work of philanthropists would be vital in seeing the positive changes coming from the Industrial Revolution. Philanthropy is defined as above. It's the desire to promote the well-being of others, especially through donation or expenditure of money on positive social causes. So the noun for this, for example, could be, she was a noted philanthropist. And the noun for an activity, he was heavily involved in philanthropy. And the adjective, they were engaged in philanthropic activities. So just so you can use that word properly. Robert Owen, who's shown in the picture above, was one very strongly noted philanthropist who challenged the way in which business operated in this time. He was involved in many great projects, but we'll just see a few of them. The main way he did his philanthropy was through his operation of the New Lanark woolen mill in Scotland. Owen believed that the factory system as it was, based on the need only for profit, was basically evil. He thought that a mill could be both profitable and help workers to improve their lives. He encouraged the owner of the mill, his father-in-law, to adopt some radical changes. Among the changes that were brought into place at New Lanark were a refusal to employ very young children under 10 years of age. This was before you were required legally to do it. Now you might go, what? Only 10 years of age? For this time, that was a pretty big deal. The second was that he voluntarily reduced working hours when he didn't have to. Robert Owen also increased the basic wages for all of his employees. The next one, which was quite radical, he decided that he improved the quality of workers' houses, building quality, spacious houses for them. The next one was he introduced a really basic form of sick pay, which up until this time didn't exist at all. And even more radically, he introduced an infant school. Now, conservative industrialists and opponents of David Dale and Robert Owen, who owned the New Lanark project, predicted its failure. They said this will never work. To their surprise, it remained profitable and became a model for many others. It would continue to operate well into the 20th century. New Lanark wasn't the only such project. Sir Titus Salt, another philanthropist, established a model town and mill named after himself called Saltaire. Here, he offered workers accommodation, entertainment facilities, and parks. The project would also show that profit and human happiness could happen at the same time. Some noted philanthropists were people you've probably heard of who were known as the Cadbury brothers, George and Richard. Members of the Quaker Christian group, the Cadburys had inherited their father's cocoa business and were determined to improve it and the lives of their workers. To this end, they too created a model village known as Bourneville, still the name that Cadbury uses for its cocoa business. Bourneville, like Saltaire and New Lanark, incorporated pleasant accommodation and a much better standard of factories than had ever been seen before. Bourneville, again, like New Lanark and Saltaire, still exists today, and as can be seen from this postcard from the Village Green. Again, the Cadburys tried to make life nicer for their workers through the provision of quality services. Roomy, well-designed houses were built alongside attractive sport and recreation areas. Healthy conditions were provided in all factories, and workers were encouraged to make use of the opportunities for further education and medical care. It's important to note that the Cadburys were very religious people, and so one of their conditions for Bourneville was that there were no pubs whatsoever. But it's got to be considered that medical and dental care for workers at this time was just unprecedented. Similar opportunities were provided by this guy known as W.H. Lever at his town of Port Sunlight. Now, you might realise that Port Sunlight was named for W.H. Lever's famous Sunlight soap brand, which still exists today and is in fact owned by a successor of W.H. Lever known as Lever and Kipchen Corporation. An American philanthropist and millionaire, George Peabody, was attempting to help in his own way by building and providing houses for the poor in what came to be known as the Peabody Flats. These were nice, roomy, well-designed apartment buildings which he let out for and sold for a fairly small rate. This is a really big improvement for working class people who often found it hard to find anywhere decent to live. Octavia Hill was a female philanthropist who believed that the way people lived could either give or take away their dignity. As a consequence, she did things like buy run-down tenement buildings and housing, She repaired them and rented them out at reasonable rates to encourage people to better themselves. Most usually, when you would come back to see these houses a few years later, they would be really well maintained and people would be very happy living with them, which seemed to prove Octavia Hill's idea. So, in conclusion, and I suppose the least you should know, during the Industrial Revolution, conditions in factories and mines had been deadly for workers for much of the late 18th and the early 19th century, mainly because of profit being pretty much the only motive that was driving the industrialists forward. Progressive politicians had worked to make improvements through many acts of parliament. Philanthropists such as Robert Owen, Titus Salt, the Cadbury family and others had invested into the well-being of their workers and had created what they called capitalism with a heart. And that's the end of this presentation.